Hello, this is Coach Matt, and in today's video, we'll be analyzing the center game. The center game is a great opening choice for beginners, and even super GMs like Jan Nepomniachtchi have regularly used this opening in their Blitz repertoire. Let's get started. Alright, so we're going to begin by going through the main line of the center game, and then we're going to take it move by move. So the center game starts out with pawn to e4, pawn to e5, d4, e takes d4, queen takes d4, knight to c6, queen e3, knight to f6, knight to c3, bishop b4, bishop d2, castle kingside, and castle queenside. And as you can see, whenever you castle opposite sides, it's going to be a race for the king. So white players that decide to play the center game really want to attack right off the bat, kind of get black out of their comfort zone of other e4, e5 openings. And this is going to be a very dynamic attacking game. Alright, now let's take it move by move. Alright, so the center game starts out with pawn to e4, pawn to e5, d4, and now in the main line we look what happens after e takes d4. But are there some other options for black? Well, most of the other options for black are going to be really bad. If you try to defend this pawn, it normally doesn't work out well. For instance, let's say we play pawn to d6. After pawn to d6, we're going to take. And then if black recaptures, we're simply going to take their queen with check, king takes, and now black can't castle. So obviously you don't want to give up castling rights in the very beginning of the game, so this would not be ideal for black. So d6 really isn't an option. f6 is terrible. Never move the f pawn in the beginning of the game, because now after we exchange, we have this beautiful fork. Queen to h5 check. If they defend with g6, we get another check. And now if they defend here, we take their rook. And let's say if they move the king up. This is actually terrible because we have check. King has to move there, it's the only move. Bring in the bishop, check. And we have a number of checkmates. Even if they try to block, it's going to end in mate. So never move the f-pawn. Simple beginner traps there. Okay, there is one good move that black could play. This one's a little tricky. It isn't the best. Again, e takes d4 is by far the best. But you might see knight to c6. Knight to c6 is a fun move because it's baiting d5, which is totally fine. And then knight to e7. And now we see there's this free pawn hanging here, so maybe knight to f3. But now knight to g6, defending the pawn. And after a few moves, so black develops their bishop, knight here, pawn here, bishop here, knight over here, castle, castle. We actually have a position that's very similar to a King's Indian defense. Except that instead of black having their bishop inactive on g7 blocked in by their e5 pawn, black gets their bishop out right away. So if you're someone that likes the King's Indian defense, this might be a line that you're interested in. Instead of taking the d4 pawn, maybe you want to play knight to c6. Alright, back to the main line. e4, e5, d4, pawn takes. Queen takes on d4, knight attacks with c6. This makes the most sense because black develops a piece and also gets to kick the queen. If you don't see this move, it will probably come eventually because it's a very natural move for black to play. So just wait for it. If they bring in that knight, let's just bring in this knight. Let's say they develop their bishop. Okay, let's just develop our bishop, taking our time. And then again, once this move comes, now we can move the queen back. So knight to c6, and now we have two options. The queen can go e3, which is something that we've looked at, and you can also play c4. c4, again, just another square where it's kind of hard and awkward for black to try to attack this queen while developing normally. So this is totally fine. But we're going to look at e3 today. Knight comes out to f6, and now we're going to bring knight to c3. You could play knight to f3 and then bishop out, but again, this is just going to castle kingside. It's going to be a very normal structure. If you're going to play something like that, there's better openings to play. So if you're going to play center game, you really need to castle opposite sides and commit to that. And once we castle opposite sides, white's plan is very easy. We're going to use these pawns. We're going to attack the king and just break down that castle. And black is going to have the same idea. They're going to play things like a5 and slowly try to break down this queenside castle. Now, there is one thing that white players should be aware of when they're playing the center game, and that is if black plays rook to e8. Rook to e8 is a fantastic move. We're pinning the pawn to the queen, and we're going to make use of that pin. So after pawn to f3, black can just play d5 now. And if white's not careful, let's say we try to develop, well, we are getting forked by that pawn, and we're going to lose a lot of material. So we have to respond to this threat of d5. We can't take. Again, we're going to get attacked. So maybe we have to move back. And now again, black gets suppressed even more. And this is obviously not the structure that we want with all these pieces on the back row when the goal is to attack our opponent's castle very quickly. So what can we do against rook to e8? Well, if you see rook to e8 and they know that d5 is coming, one thing that you can play is queen to g3. This is a very tricky move. So let's look over some lines that happen with queen to g3. Well, first of all, if they try to take the knight, and we take, this pawn in the center cannot be captured by the knight, as it would lead to checkmate on g7. And then similarly, if they're over here and they say, okay, I'm going to take with the rook now black has won the pawn, but now we simply develop our bishop, and look how all our pieces, again, are getting very simple play on attacking that king. So there's definitely some counterplay for this. And then let's look at one more line. Let's say knight takes. Okay, if knight takes, we're going to take with the knight. They can't take the bishop because we're going to recapture with the knight. So instead they have to capture with the rook. And again, this is nothing to worry about. Let's just have some fun kicking pieces. Let's attack that bishop. Bishop moves back. Let's bring in our other bishop. And again, white's having fun here. We're getting a very quick attack. There's a lot of things we can do with this sort of position. So if you're going to play the center game, you might need to be prepared to sacrifice some material. But that shouldn't be anything to worry about, especially if you're playing the center game and thinking, the whole reason I'm playing this is because I want to attack very quickly. I want to get black out of their comfort zone and just kind of send it on the king side. Thanks for watching. If you or someone you know is interested in studying chess, please check out the description below.